Peace. What's happening, good people? This gift here for Payusnomind, and today we're talking about ASCAP and whether ASCAP is robbing artists. Crazy, right? I know. I had a guy hit me up on Patreon and ask, he said he's been with ASCAP a number of years. He's had songs played on the radio. He's never gotten a check. Can I tell him why? ASCAP doesn't pay you per time your song gets played on the radio. ASCAP pays based on a percentage system. That's not too different from the way Spotify pays artists. They pay you a percentage of their revenue based on your percentage of radio airplay, where the more songs and the more times your songs got played on the radio and the higher percentage that you account for radio airplay time, the higher percentage of revenue you get from ASCAP. Now, where things get sketchy is how they break those numbers down and how they get to the percentages to pay artists, right? ASCAP spends a certain number of time randomly sampling radio stations, right? And the way that they determine how long to spend listening to certain radio stations is based on a few things. One, region, right? They look at the regions that generate the highest percentage of revenue for ASCAP. And the regions that generate the highest percentage of revenue for ASCAP get the majority of those listening hours. And after regions, they look at the amount of revenue generated per station. So the stations that generate the highest percentage of revenue for ASCAP get the majority of the listening hours within the region. So if you are getting your music played in a region that doesn't generate a high percentage of revenue for ASCAP, or on stations that don't generate a high percentage of revenue for ASCAP, they're probably not even being monitored, which means they're not even listening to the radio stations to even hear your song get played to pay you for those plays. Now, where that's unfair and can come into play with kind of stealing almost is in the fact that they're still collecting money from those stations that they're not monitoring for those stations that have the right to play your music. So all of those stations that don't generate a high enough percentage of revenue for ASCAP for them to listen to what they're playing, they still charge those stations in those regions for the right to play the music that they're playing. And as an independent and unsigned artist, you're more likely to have your music played on those stations. So they're effectively taking money from you and giving it to bigger artists because your streams on those stations don't count. So that money that you should be getting a percentage of, you don't get. Instead, that money gets lumped into ASCAP's overall revenue and paid out to the artists who are getting their music played on the major radio stations that they do monitor. Now, it's not that black alley, hoodie, and a gun type of theft. It's that corporate America, white collar type of theft. But it's still theft nonetheless. You know, it's still money that you're owed because you're owed money for you getting radio play and they're not paying it to you and they're taking it and giving it to somebody else. You know, so if you wanted to understand why ASCAP hasn't sent you a check, that's why. You're probably getting your music played on radio stations that they could care less about and they're not paying attention to. Now the question is, should they? Is that fair? And the answer to that is no, it's not fair. They should be updating a system or figuring out a way where they can monitor all of these stations and pay all artists adequately. But it's also a matter of, do they even want to? Because in doing that, then you would have way more artists split in the same pie, you know, and that would mean that a lot of these bigger artists will be making less money and might not be as happy as they are now with ASCAP, and they might go elsewhere. They might go and see an independent publisher or something like that can get them their money and they see more of that money, you know, rather than, you know, having to split the pie with all of these other artists that they feel like don't carry as much weight as they do. So that is an explanation of why ASCAP doesn't send you a check, and it's also showcasing how they're how they're stealing from indie and unsigned artists. This is Gift Signing off. Pay us no mind. Peace.